Since Friday's disputed presidential election in Iran, the country is witnessing some of the largest street demonstrations since the 1979 revolution. There have been anti-government protests before in Iran, particularly in 1999 and 2003, but those were centered on university campuses, and after 3 or 4 days, the government just sent in a bunch of Basiji vigilantes to break them up, and in one case they threw some students out dormitory windows, and they used clubs and chains and bricks to sort of just create sort of bloody mayhem around them, and of course they arrested hundreds of students. At the time, President Mohammad Khatami said that, he didn't want bloodshed and everybody should go home, and he kind of pushed the idea that the regime was pushing that if they had grievances, they could address them through the ballot box. And this time, that message has failed. They've tried the intimidating tactics. There's still people on the streets. They've tried saying that they're going to do something about the election, but people are demanding a total recount. And I think there's 3 very important differences this time. First of all, it's not limited to students. It cuts across all economic classes and ages, and they're huge. The numbers are just on a different scale of magnitude. Secondly, there's a figure around whom all the opposition is rallying, and that's Mir Hossein Mousavi. And Mr. Mousavi has a history. He was prime minister in the 1980s when there was a significant internal opposition, and there was a lot of violence. A couple of Iran analysts have told me that between 10 and 20,000 people were killed in sort of battles at that time. And so he's a veteran of those, so he is probably less timid about there being bloodshed, although he's called for people to stay home so there isn't any. People think that he's just a harder character and willing to be more confrontational. Third, the student protests were sparked by fairly narrow issues. I mean, one was a freedom of speech issue when a newspaper was shut down, and the second was some controversy over privatization of education. But this time it's really it's a deeper, more fundamental issue about, are people's voices going to be heard? In trying to predict how this might end, Iran experts think it's going to be difficult to reach any kind of compromise because the opposition is demanding a new presidential election, which is unlikely that the regime will agree to that. And they're basically expecting kind of a Tiananmen moment when, the Chinese government rolled tanks into the main square in Beijing to crush a pro-democracy movement. And Iran experts are kind of anticipating something similar in Tehran, but with that will also be crushed the idea that the Islamic Republic is governed by a popularly elected government.